Okay.
Love it.
All right. And give people a few minutes. And we'll give folk a few minutes to join. It's 1:59.
The best part about being from Green Bay this year is the introductions aren't nearly as long when the football team is doing this bad.
Yeah, I got some grounds to recover for the Packers. Yeah. Well, plenty of games still to play. Yeah, for the rest.
It's a long season.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm a Viking fan, so I'm in good shape.
But who would live in Green Bay? I mean,
Nobody would.
On purpose, right?
I mean,
That's
you must be embarrassed to put your postal code in your your mail.
How much snow is outside right now, Todd?
65 degrees today.
Is it? Oh, that's warm.
Tomorrow will be 29. So it's
Big
and
cold front.
we're done with our warm days after today.
Yeah.
Well, after this call, I'm going out in the beautiful California sunshine. It is 78 degrees outside and perfect.
Oh boy, good for you.
It's a little warmer than closer to the coast. It's more like getting down to the 40s at night now.
Yeah. It's cold at night.
All right. So we'll give folk, it's 2 p.m. We'll give folk another minute or two to join. Okay.
Nice of people to join. We can't see them, but I know they're there. Feel them come staring at us.
Yeah. It's ticking up. Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Okay, let's get started. So first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone attending, and I'd like to welcome our panelists. I'm going to ask our panelists just to briefly introduce themselves in a minute. But this is our first in what we hope will be a series of discussions around delivery performance. We chose a theme of how is the delivery performance gap costing you money? Maybe that's somewhat controversial, but we wanted to kind of stimulate this discussion. You know, when you look at what's happened over the last few years, it's been tough times for the supply chain. And particularly if you listen to earnings calls and senior executives, you can feel their pain about delivery performance through the pandemic. Many top shippers have really been caught out with supply chain bottlenecks and inventory that's not in the right place. Recent research, though, for the US indicated that about 8% of US GDP is spent on logistics. So $1.8 trillion is spent on logistics. So that's a huge amount of investment. And if you narrow down and look at the truck delivery space, in 2021, over 450 billion was spent, by shippers getting goods from A to B in the US alone. So hugely important part of the supply chain and logistics operations. And clearly shippers are prepared to pay for getting products to their customers and providing a really good level of service. But as we all know, It's you'd think trucking from A to B and getting goods from A to B would be simple, but it isn't. There are many stakeholders. So really looking forward to this discussion. Just want to share my screen for a moment and display a slide. So here we go. Just to help everyone with framing the discussion. So the agenda really today is we'll take a look at defining the delivery performance gap. So we at Clockwork think of ourselves as a delivery performance company. The teams here are really trying to focus on solving challenging delivery problems for our customers and come up with great solutions. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that and then talk about the journey from digitization to optimization. So across the panel, we have incredible experience and we are all looking to gather the data and digitize, but then we will discuss what can you do strategically when you have that information in your hands and you have that information in the hands of the people on the ground who are managing deliveries. And I think that'll fill most of our time. And then I think we'll have a wide-ranging discussion. And so we'll try to do a wrap-up just to summarize some main points at the end of the session. So without further delay, I'd just like to go around the room and ask the panelists just to briefly introduce themselves and their companies and what they do. And I'll start with Siva, if you'd like to start.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. I'm Siva Narayanan. I work for Solvay. Solvay is a global specialty chemical company dealing with everything from commodity materials to specialty materials, from soda ash, which is a commodity from the ground, all the way to the high-value composites. I am the Global Logistics Director for Solvay's oil and gas business unit. And oil and gas is basically involved in the mining of petroleum. It's not a bad thing. I know everybody there go green, but you know what? If that's what you have dished out with, you just make it better, right? So we're not all going to go electric overnight, as much as we wish to, and Solvay wishes to. But there will still be oil and gas out there, and while it's out there, we're going to make it cleaner, we're going to make it better and easier. So that's my pitch for today on Solvay and my role.
Thanks, Siva. And Todd.
Hey, good afternoon. Todd Ericksrud from MatchBack Systems. I'm the president and CEO of MatchBack Systems. We were founded about 8 years ago. And prior to starting at MatchBack, I spent my career last 20 years really focused on the synchronization of the international and domestic supply chain. And it just fascinated me, hence founding MatchBack. And while I was over there, trying to synchronize that, I managed a large port dray trucking fleet and a global 3PL business that helped people manage all of the milestones of the containers coming in. So I got to see firsthand where some of those bottlenecks were, and also the value of data optimization, and ultimately, how do you turn all of that great analysis and information into operations and move that forward? So just to introduce MatchBack Systems, we are a logistics software company that's really focused on supercharging that sustainability, visibility, and operational efficiency for that truck and that container. And we are focused on really all elements of the international supply chain inland. So once that container hits the port and starts moving in, we're really focused on helping people shine a bright light on that part of the supply chain.
Great, thank you. And I think your career, to me, having worked in the logistics industry, so many of what things that we're doing, it is a journey. It takes many years to build these robust systems. So looking forward to the conversation. And
thank you. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. And last but not least, our own Rob Haney from Clockwork Logistics.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, Rob Haney. I also, like our friends on the panel, I've had more than 20 years of international logistics experience at a 3PL, and then later on at a network ocean play called Intra, which is now part of E2Open. Always in a product or technology oriented role. I love supply chain technology, and it's really where I discovered that we have a problem with delivery in the supply chain. It's been something that I've been chasing pretty much my entire career. And so I founded Clockwork Logistics with the idea that we would once and for all really work to focus and solve one thing, which is the global supply chain delivery. And that's what we're after.
Yeah. So thanks, Rob. And I'd like to just kick off with a pretty general question. It might be a hard question to answer succinctly, but just why is it so difficult to ensure reliable, on-time delivery? Just high level, this challenge of getting trucks from A to B, because for so many people, it's mystifying for them. So just interested in your high level thoughts, Siva.
Well, pardon the pun, I think we're dealing with a lot of moving parts, right? So I think that's what it is, the high level. Why can't we have on-time delivery? And I think sometimes we're chasing the wrong part of the problem, because what seems to accentuate may not be the problem. The problem may be further down deep inside in something very simple. I think we'll get into details of that later on in our conversation. Yeah. But the difficulty in why we're not achieving what we want to achieve is because it's a lot of moving parts. And I always say this, and I'll say it one more time in this webinar: simplicity creates value, complexity destroys value. So we have complexity and we're destroying value. So let's try to simplify. And if we simplify, we'll create value, and that on time will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Yes. Eric. Sorry, Todd.
No problem. I think all of us have, been in the supply chain for a couple of years, some of us decades. But all you have to do is look back the last 2 and 3 years to see where those chinks in the supply chain were all highlighted during the pandemic, when we saw just the flow of material and the flow of equipment change dramatically and drastically. And I think that highlights what Siva's talking about, where, we've got very fragmented drayage networks, we've got multiple ports, and we've got siloed platforms and systems, and it just makes it very hard and difficult to move product, which makes it difficult to get it delivered on time.
Yeah, many stakeholders, which kind of take away from the value of having these great logistics hubs. That you get with that, you get congestion and lots of.
Exactly. If you think about it, it's almost like the basketball flowing through the snake, and you've got these mega vessels that are coming to ports, and you've got all of the chassis that need to be there, all the trucks that are arriving to pick it up. And all of a sudden you just create your own bottlenecks as you go throughout the process. And then once that gets stressed by things like the pandemic, you're going to find out where those real bottlenecks and challenges are in your supply chain.
Yeah. And also you have a lot of parochial interests, right? I mean, I'm trying to fix my part of the problem, and and not realizing that I'm creating a problem for somebody else. And the guy who does not have the muscle to fix a part of the problem is the guy suffering with what these guys are trying to push down through the pipe. It's a balloon squeeze. Unless we holistically look at the problem as not as logisticians, not as shipping lines or whatever. Let's look at ourselves as the end consumer. Each one of us is a consumer, right? When your wife doesn't find toilet paper on the shelves and you're a logistician, you better go hide under the blanket, right? Because you didn't have the answer for her. So we have to be consumers. And if we look at it through a consumer lens, we will probably find the solution, and that's important.
It's interesting that you bring up the consumer angle, because I saw a number today that final mile delivery is the largest recipient of venture capital investment, totaling over $6 billion. So to date, but when you dig into those numbers, what you'll find is most of that is really going to B2C delivery, things like Instacart or GoPuff or something, so grocery delivery, right? So when you actually look deeper and you see how much of that is actually going to what I would consider international global supply chain processes, it's actually very little. Typically, it would be focused on digitizing an old existing supply chain process, like maybe freight brokerage, which is valid. I love to see digital brokers, but there's a lot left to do, and there's a lot of what Siva's talking about is the change that we're seeing in the way we think about consumer delivery, B2C delivery, how things are being delivered to our door, is changing the way people think about B2B delivery across the global supply chain as well. So there's a big impact, and it's driving a lot of demand and urgency in this area.
And if you look at, the supply chain as a continuous tour, if you take that container, and what we look at, you take that container from the port, ultimately it's getting delivered to an importer, but there are so many touches and so many dwell points that it takes that container almost a month to get back to the port to be exported. And it's a month, it's very expensive, and there's very little transparency as it walks through there. So all of those things, it brings that complexity that Siva was mentioning into the supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, not to take a sentence from a biz book, from a business book. It's the end to end, right? We all talk end to end, but we don't behave and we don't do end to end. But we must do end to end. When you have different stakeholders only interested in saving that $50 per truck or $100 per truck, not realizing that he's got $100,000 worth of product, which is working capital, which is cash flow, which is contribution margin you're not going to get from an end customer. The guy who's dealing with that $50, $100 doesn't understand his game and his little what he called world, and he's like having a frog in a well. He basically sees, if I get that $50, I go home like a champion. So we need to peel that band-aid off very quickly and start looking at it from an end to end. And everybody, all the stakeholders. I'm not blaming points. I mean, not pointing fingers at anybody, over here. But we need to pull that band-aid off and say, get together and say, why is this not happening? Why is my container that's supposed to take 30 days? Today, I had a situation today that's taking 90 days to go across. Why 90 days? Oh, ships got held up in the port for 30 days because they were congested. What happened to the good old cut and run? Those questions, those hard questions are not being asked because they're hard. They're like Kennedy said, right? We do the hard things, right? That's why they went to the moon. So basically, we have to do the hard things and peel that band-aid off and jointly take effort to make sure that we can right the ship.
Yeah. I think, Siva, you've started to lay out some of the costs, hidden costs of sort of a narrow focus on delivery performance. And I think we'll pick up that thread a lot in this conversation, and the misalignment of stakeholders' incentives. So they just care about their $50 or whatever it is. And I want to spend a bit more time sort of digging into the costs and the pain. But Rob, can you just for level setting, just help define how delivery performance gap, for how you look at it? And
happy to do that. It's a gap because the gap exists between international ERP system or TMS systems and then local operations who are trying to get a delivery done, whether that's a port move or from an airport to the warehouse or a final mile move. If you need to get a delivery done and you're working in international supply chain, you have one of three choices. You can either do it and I call it the ABCs to help you remember it, right? You can either do it using analog, so basically paper, or you get really exciting if you're using a spreadsheet, an email, maybe texting. So that's that, and often that's being done by local offices. So if you're a global shipper, it's some poor guy, in the local offices dealing with truckers quite manually. B stands for broker. You can just send the whole thing out to somebody else and let them deal with it, because it's too complicated and they have relationships to the trucks, so just let them handle it, and there's value there. In some cases, there's also value in owning those truck relationships yourself, and I think that's something that Siva can speak to quite smartly. And then C stands for carrier haulage, and I know Todd has a lot of experience working with carriers on optimizing their moves, their port drayage moves. So these are your choices. You either do it yourself, and it's always been analog, outsource it to a broker, or let the ocean carrier handle it, ABC. And then what Clockwork's offering is a new idea, which is digitizing the analog component of that. So we enable global shippers to actually have a digitized version of a relationship to truck power globally.
Yeah.
So that's where we do find the delivery gap. It's that space between what the ERP system or the TMS system can do typically, and what a local office has to do to get a delivery done.
Yeah, so it's that gap between visibility, which is defined in many ways, and operations. And Siva, I recall when we spoke earlier in the week, just love to hear your story, on the ground story of how what you heard in terms of what the industry was saying and what you discovered yourself.
Yes, that was a very interesting story. I mean, earlier this year, I attended a large transportation conference in Long Beach, and in that conference, I heard a lot of speakers speak, saying that we have improved gate times, we have extra gates, we have all kinds of improvements put in, and saying that, well, those gates are not utilized, so maybe we do not need the night gates, and so on and so forth. All that good stuff that you read in the journals and so on and so forth. But I wasn't feeling that love, right? I mean, basically I am a user, plus I'm management, I get that. But, for maybe Todd and Rob and Andrew, me, I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and get into the trenches if I have to. That's my nature. So on the first day after hearing all this, I called my plant up and I told my plant, I need to have a meeting on Wednesday morning. Okay. I'm coming to the plant Wednesday morning, and these are the people that I want to meet with. I want to meet with the materials manager. I want to meet with the warehouse manager, and I want to meet with your favorite trucker, whoever your trucker is and who does a good job for you. I want to meet with him. So I literally want to meet where the rubber meets the road. Okay. Pardon the pun again, but where the rubber meets the road. And then I spoke to them, and the trucker told me, what you heard is not what's happening on the ground. The trucker is an independent operator who's got a group of independent operators. They get together, and he's got a little company going. He drives, right? He needs to be on the road. He needs to know where the lines are long. He needs to know what's happening in Delancey Street. He needs to know what's happening in front of ABC Terminal. He wants to know how long the lines are. He has to make the decision when to cut and run so that he can make the other two appointments and not stay in this one appointment the whole day and not make his turns. Okay. So long story short, I got Rob involved in this because Rob was trying to, we're friends, Rob, but he's trying to sell me something else. Okay. So I got Rob involved in this, and I said, I told Rob, listen, I know you guys are smart. You're smart guys. Your people are great, smart people. I want you to come in, peel the onion off, and take a look under the hood, what exactly is wrong and why it's wrong. And then let's get back together again. So what came out of this? So important thing is the driver has to feel committed. He has to feel that he's being taken care of. The driver needed an app, needed a way of communicating while sitting in the cab to all the stakeholders. Now, talking about stakeholders, they are the plant, they are the freight forwarder, they are the broker in case there's one. There is the terminals, there is the, everybody's steamship line. The driver needs to communicate this with everybody instead of it being a serial chain over 3 time zones. And by the time you kind of missed out, and then you have a container missing the gate, right? Then you roll the box another 7 days. And good old Q1, we rolled the box 21 days, right? The ships are all waiting outside. That's working capital. So the problem, like I alluded to earlier on in the conversation, is actually down minute in some place. We got to tackle that. And we got to get everybody on board to say, if we did this right upstream, we plug the hole upstream, we don't have to dam the flood downstream. Okay, so let's plug the hole upstream. So it took quite a fair bit of education and a little bit of what I would say, trying to spread the gospel, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And go out there and say, let's do this because this can work. And I think we've made some traction over the last 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I think a few points that resonate with me is one part of the solution is, I mean, every company has big core systems, but there's definitely, when you get a lot of decisions are being made locally, and you have these local teams, and they don't have the tools. Those big systems aren't really designed for that. And that's, if you can solve for that, that can really help. And then I think the other piece is designing software that recognizes people are operating in an ecosystem, and you have to have a workflow and a way to integrate with those different systems in order to provide the information they need. And I think you said to me, to make their lives easier.
Yeah, but beyond the system, right, Andrew, there's a human element. Right? The analyst in the freight forwarding company, the driver in the cab, the warehouse manager on the shop floor, they have to feel that their requirement, their lifestyle is going to change because of this. And once we get that buy-in from the ground up, that is unshakable. Because management can decide to do whatever it is, but you need that ground up buy-in. Otherwise, it'll just be another top-down exercise, right? 3 years later, it goes out of fashion, we do another one. So you need this bottom up kind of appreciation. You're doing something for me. A clean bathroom for the driver. Donuts when the driver comes in at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? These are small things. These are intangibles, but sometimes it does not get recognized.
I think, Siva, you're highlighting just the inefficiency that's fraught in the international supply chain. It is just overwhelming to somebody. And you're right. If you take it from, everybody comes at this from their point of view, and very few people are looking at this holistically. I know you said end to end. We often talk about life cycle management, that container for its entire life cycle. Let's figure out how to manage that and optimize the use and reuse of it so that you can reduce that dwell time. But that driver is critically important to all of the operations in the inland supply chain.
Yeah, let me give you one more example, and Rob can testify to this. When we went in, and you heard from many ocean carriers, I think we've all been in some fashion with ocean or terminals involved in it, right? Oh, it's so poor to forecast. Nobody forecasts, right? I'm able to give Rob a good 90 days ahead of time what I'm going to be loading into containers. I'm doing it today. Why? Because my customers give me a 120-day lead time when they put a purchase order. Then there is no reason for me not to put it in the system 90, maybe 60 days in advance. So it is possible to forecast. It is. It's only whether what are you going to do with that? What is the people in the end-to-end going to do with that number? Or do they really know how to deal with that number?
And we've worked with customers that they're trying to shorten that lead time, and figuring sometimes it's working capital. You don't have confidence in your supply chain because it doesn't have the delivery performance that you expect. So you add a week, and now all of a sudden, a company like yours, Siva, if you add a week of inventory, that inventory carrying cost is astronomical. So if you can start getting control of that and understanding where those bottlenecks are, and that's real money to those large companies.
Right. And also don't forget, goods in transit is real money.
Yes.
Right. It doesn't mean it left your plant. It's not yours anymore. No, it is still yours until somebody's paid for it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So goods in transit is still your money. So you got to understand this. This is business 101. And the guy who's chasing that $50 got to understand his $50, if it increases the goods in transit, he just wasted a few $100,000 down the drain.
I think what's important is, and Andy helped me write a blog on Halloween called The Headless Horseman of Logistics, which, and that term headless is kind of new to me. It's a new term in technology, but it basically means that we can connect with Siva's ERP, and we can connect with Todd's optimization system, and we can connect to whatever TMS the trucker prefers. We don't have to ask people to switch the interface that they're comfortable using. So if the freight forwarder has their own system and they're happy to use it, this ecosystem of humans can be brought together with technology, everybody playing their own role. So this idea of a monolith system, logistics system that has to do everything end to end perfectly, which we've never been able to achieve, as far as I know, in our industry, is now being solved by a lot of smart people doing their bit and tying that all together through what we can call a headless ecosystem of technology and people. And the people get to play in the way they want to play, which is going to help make it not a trip to the dentist, so that the driver's happy, the freight forwarder's happy, and the logistics team at Solvay is happy.
Yeah.
Right. You need to meet people where they're at. You need to be able to say, you know what, this is the way we operate, you know, whether it's A, B, or C, you know, some people, you know, Rob, to use your analogy there. But you also need to figure out a way that you can have those integrations that create value to, you know, so using your analogy, Rob, we don't need people to come out to every platform. What they need to do for us, we're the optimization engine for the international, you know, street turn process. You know, whether they get that through our APIs, you know, or coming to our platform, I don't care, or using somebody else's platform, or us integrating directly with their TMSs. It just makes all the sense in the world to have, you know, a very configurable platform that provides the results that they want where they want them.
Yeah. And that's actually a theme that I want to pick up, is, you know, we've talked a lot about the challenges, the gaps, the costs, the problems. You know, as processes, as data gets off paper and is digitized and is shared, then, you know, then there are all these strategies. Then you can start, you know, go up the curve, I guess, the maturity curve, and you can start to optimize. You got choices. Do I want to optimize around sustainability, or container reuse, or customer on-time delivery? And Todd, you know, I feel like your company is, and your career has been on that. Okay, you know, give me the data. I don't care how I get it. And then I can start to think about optimization, and just, you know, wanted to talk a bit more about the sorts of things that you're optimizing for.
Yeah. So just to give maybe a little bit more introduction, you know, as a software company really focused on the reuse of that container and the use of it, you know, we see the optimization of that container and that truck as really the last frontier of optimization in the international supply chain. There's significant opportunities that you can get there. We focus on a term called street turn. It's when a delivering container gets reloaded with an export container without it going back to a railhead, to the terminal, or to a yard. And today, fewer than 5% of the containers are being reloaded on the street, so hence the street turn. And we know fully that over 40% of them have the opportunity to do that. Every time that you can do that, you're going to have significant savings. In the US alone, that's, you know, 600 million truck miles across, you know, all these imports and exports that would also eliminate a lot of emissions for people. And we're strong advocates for sustainability as well. So over 1 million metric tons of emissions can be eliminated just with that optimization and understanding, you know, this life cycle, you know, Siva's end to end, and how Rob, you know, was talking about meeting the customer where they're at. By bringing those together, there's a significant opportunity for the industry, you know.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what business you're in, right? Today, the important thing is working capital, right? Why working capital? Because if you want to borrow money because your working capital is not optimized, you're going to pay at 5, 6, 7% interest rates. You're not getting anything back. You're going to give it to somebody, right? So the working capital for me as a shipper is my product.
Mhm.
Working capital for the steamship line, like Todd said, is the container, right? So we're all on the same thing. If you can ship my product, or I can use your container and street turn it, you're not making me or Todd or the shipping line happy. We're all going to be happy campers. But
Right.
that's our working capital. Let's improve our working capital. So I think the word that needs to go out there is find out what is your working capital and how are you improving your working capital. Second point, we are all, I mean, Todd's the president, right? So he's the head honcho. So I'll exclude him on this one. But we're all a microcosm of our own companies, right? I run logistics, I run supply chain as a microcosm of what my product line on my GBU, my global business unit is supposed to run. So I got to figure out what is the working capital, how I can optimize the working capital for my people. I need to figure out what raw material I need to bring in and what finished goods I can send out. I can't be one and not the other because both combined is working capital. I need to look at my plant capacity. And guess who is bringing the raw material in? And guess who's taking it out? It's the driver and the truck. If that guy doesn't perform, he's going to mess up your working capital and your raw material delivery and eventually your finished product going out. So you got to know when you come down, right, to the silo, the microcosm, all the way down to the unit level, who is the hamster on the wheel? Sorry,
Right.
he's the guy doing it. So we got
And that's, and Siva, for that trucking company, he's focused on his working capital, which is going to get down to that revenue per truck per day. And how can he turn those wheels? And, when we talk about street turns as an example, that's one where you can run more revenue generating miles across that same piece of vehicle. You're not going to get into all the congestion, because you're going to have only 2 trips to the port rather than 4. So all of the metrics in it that have a big benefit there. But that trucker now is making a decision on how he's going to operate that does have a downstream impact on you as the BCO or on the ocean carrier or the other parties that are all waiting for them, or they're sitting on a chassis.
And if I make it easy for him, right, to do my business, that's value creation for him. Value creation is not what creates it. Value creation is a perception. If I'm talking to you today and you take nothing away from this, I just destroyed your value. Okay. But if I'm talking to you today and you take a ton of notes from what we're talking today, we created value. All right. So value creation is a perception of the receiver, is not the intent of the originator. Okay. So if I create value for my trucker, he would want to come back to my yard to pick up my boxes every day. He will make it a habit. He will show up at 7 o'clock in the morning or at 6 p.m. because he knows that I am 5 miles away from the port. I could be the first or the last, right? Then we create a pattern. We create a habit. Once we have a pattern and a habit, then it's muscle memory and everybody knows what to do.
Yeah. It's interesting. In the delivery business, in a way, we're in the business of helping you unlock that working capital, or those strategies, as a service provider, right? So we don't want to burden your team with new work like manual data entry, right? We want to enable them to unlock value, hidden value. And what's most surprising to me when I got into the delivery focus of Clockwork was how big that was. Andy and I often laughed about it. When you start pulling that thread, you start to realize how big the sweater is, and you start pulling, and there's so many things to do in delivery when you start, looking at, drayage is a great example, but drayage, air freight, final mile, they're all different. And every shipper has a different strategy that they want to execute. Solvay wants to make sure that his trucks don't miss their appointments, but also you're worried about miles on the road. Another shipper might be worried about security, depending on what's in the container, right? So there's all these different strategies which are demanding different actions. Exactly. And so it's that variation that I think digitizing delivery really is going to bring. So it's all about building towards a supply chain of the future where we can actually execute specific strategies across global supply chain delivery networks, which is super exciting.
Yeah, it's I mean, Rob, you could you talk a bit about your thesis in terms of, if you think about how the industry has been trying to address this, really the biggest investment area has been in truck brokering, right? And that has value. But I guess my question is that the best long-term systemic way of solving for all these challenges? Or, is it likely that we will see, because working capital, all the end-to-end discussion, that there's tremendous value in having more direct control over your trucking power and those relationships?
Well, certainly there's a lot of value in what a digital broker does, but it's an old model that's getting a new look. And analog delivery, or doing it yourself, is an old model too. That we can also digitize and have a lot of value as well. The thesis at Clockwork is that if you insource your relationship with your truckers globally, you can actually gain control of delivery globally. And I can tell you, I've talked to enough truckers, they love it. They love the idea that they have a direct business relationship with a guy like Siva. They prefer it 100%. It's not a mercenary relationship. It's a contractual relationship that is built up over time and mutual respect that then becomes resilient. So if Siva needs help from a trucker that he's contracted with, he can pick up the phone and the guy will answer and he will help him. It's very, we can see that relationship building, and it's something that can scale. The modern supply chain, in a large way, because of the reliance on delivery technology that is was very siloed with just the largest trucking companies, started to disintermediate the small guy. So a small independent trucker in Indonesia or even in the US doing trades was starting to get pushed out, and all they would hear was rates. And so you could do a great job, but you're not going to get recognized for it. I think as we move into a new supply chain where everybody's connected, whether it's through through Todd's technology, through what I'm doing, or through somebody else, it doesn't matter. Then once they're connected and they're a player, then the best players win, and they can and that value that they're doing, on time, secure, low carbon. If I care about carbon, I only want to go to the guy with electric trucks or the clean trucks. Then those guys can benefit from the good things that they're doing, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
Pre-meltdown, pre-congestion, pre-COVID, whatever the things, right? It's all BC, right? Before COVID. Okay. At that time, basically everything was going hunky-dory, everybody was happy, and brokers had their role, etc., etc. The litmus test, the hard thing happened when COVID struck and everything went haywire, where everything was imbalanced. And when the broker came back, and no ding on any broker, but then the broker came back and said, sorry, I called 6 people, they can't do it, I give up. That's what means the model is broken.
Yeah.
Right. The reason the shipper went to the broker is for resilience. And when that resilience, when that faith got shaken, right? And when that faith got shaken is when you start to question the religion you're following. Okay. Sorry to get theological here, but that's what it is. Okay. So then you start exploring. You start exploring, what is the new model? Who is doing this? And that's how we came up with my relationship with my trucker in Long Beach, my requirement to go find out somebody who can try and fix this. What is the new thing? So you got to explore after a disruption. Go ahead, Todd. I know you're going to say something.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
So you're part of my religion. That's fine.
I follow your religion.
That's exciting is once it's done, once you gain that digitized network locally, whatever, now you can start to do things. And I think the best is yet to be. When I look at the modern supply chain and the way we digitizing processes, right, there are two big heavy things that happen in the supply chain process around delivery. They're called the tender. Basically, I choose this truck carrier, and the dispatch. Basically, I choose this driver. Okay, these are two different ideas that are generally done by people, and they should generally be done better with computers. And I think it's an area that, Todd, that you can really help us.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do, right? We're looking at the reuse of that container, the use and the reuse. So we're tendering both, for the import as well as for that reuse. And when we send we work with our customers very closely. We want to make sure that we've got a configurable system that's delivering them the results that they would expect, right? There's no sense in me providing them something that doesn't make sense. So we incorporate their business rules. We make sure that it's looking at the business the way that they want to look at the business. And we're going to share those results with them. And we're very transparent with them. And what they're telling us, as an optimization software, we've got to do one of two things. We've got to either be able to solve the problem faster, or we got to be able to solve the problem better. And we think, we're going to go up toe-to-toe with them and say, we think we can do both. And oftentimes, generally what we're going to find out is when we send them that results, as we're going through the pre-sales process, they're going to say, oh my, out of these 100 optimization opportunities, 70 of them are ones that we already had. It's like, great, our software works. You're getting the result that you expect. They go, 20% of them are things that we just missed because we had a bad day. And I'm going to talk to, whoever planner on that. But that planner just can't do all those combinations and permutations that we can. And then the final 10%, they go, we would have never gotten those with our own thought process and the way we look at it without the optimization engine and algorithms that you guys are running. It's, when you start looking at things, and Siva talked to this, I think earlier, about you got to look at things very comprehensive as the ecosystem. Even within your own networks, solving a one-to-one is easy. One to many and many to one you can do a lot of times. But when you start getting many to many and you get tens of thousands of combinations and permutations, what's really critical is not that you have millions of opportunities, is that you understand which 5 are going to make the biggest impact on your business. And so understanding how should you prioritize your day and what work should you be doing? You optimize, like Siva said, find those drivers that are going to do the work for us. Great. Let's make those systematic opportunities where we're continually pre-orchestrating and providing that work because, Rob's expecting it and Siva needs it. So let's make sure it happens every single day. But there's also those other opportunities where you can really find those opportunities and ultimately they're going to get systemized as well. And you're going to find those savings. So a long-winded answer just to say that I think there's a big opportunity to provide some, systematic approaches to the way that you look at your business. And as long as they're incorporating the way that you think about the world, you're going to be better off. And this isn't about replacing people. This is about complementing them, meeting them where they're at, providing them an extra tool set to be more capable, and turn their 9 and 10 hour day into, something less than 9 or 10 hours days, but also show a big improvement in their operation.
Yeah, one of the things I think listeners should be aware of, right? It's not a broad brush. Okay, the solution is not a broad brush. You plug in a software, you plug in a driver, you plug in something and it works. No, I'm a chemical shipper. I got hazmat. I deal with what I call ethyl methyl death. Okay, we don't want to have our names splashed around I-710 in Long Beach. Okay, we don't want that. So basically, there's a lot of other things that needs to be kind of tailor-made to that one particular industry. I mean, there's a broad brush. Not every resin is hazardous. Not every chemical is hazardous. So even within the whole chemical spectrum, you have certain clusters that you want to deal with and not deal with. And as consumers, we are so trans-Pacific eastbound. When you talk about container drayage, we forget that there's a westbound, okay? We forget that we in North America feed the raw material for Asia to make those widgets to bring it back to us. Okay, so it's a round trip. So we can't stay in our own, and I'm doing a plug for you, Todd, on MatchBack, we can't stay in our own little thing and say, I'm only westbound, I'm only eastbound. No, it's the westbound and the eastbound has got to get together and figure out who's got the box, is it a right box, who's got the 20s when I need the 20s, and who can take chemicals and come up with the algorithm around that and say, this is the match. I mean, you got to be one of those matchmakers that they have in some countries, they find husbands and wives. That's what we need to do over here. So it's not a new concept. It's been going on for ages, but we just need to make
the days of containerization.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think the best algorithms are yet to be written. You know, when I think about delivery, we generally think about it in terms of profile. So a export container profile for Solvay is different than a final mile delivery profile for Walmart in Mexico. There's very different types of deliveries, but optimization will work the same way. When you know, you may decide to choose this carrier, the tender, because he's the best performer or the lowest rate, or maybe he's new and you're trying to encourage him, or maybe you have a quantity commitment on your contract and you need to hit it and you haven't been doing it. So there's lots of reasons why the tender, the decision to choose that carrier is much more complex than we treat it today. The same thing is true of dispatch and driver, and these algorithms are something that is part of the next phase of supply chain digitization around delivery. It's that big sweater we're pulling the thread.
And we talked a lot about operations. We've talked about digitization, optimization, some big rock themes. But Rob, you know, there's also the financial side, the pricing and accessorial piece of delivery performance. We've only got a few minutes left, but I know that's an area where we've started to dig into, and we're having customers want us to manage contracts and rates and so forth.
Yeah, it's another reason why delivery, you asked in the beginning, what's the cost and why is it so hard to do? It's another reason why it's so hard to do. You know, every truck can have a different accessorial, and then the fuel surcharges are different, and then the rates are different, and there's rate rules, and it's crazy actually. And a lot of this is trying to be a lot of global shippers are actually trying to execute complex local truck contracts on spreadsheets. There's very little standardization. It is very difficult to do. This is a frontier at Clockwork, and certainly something worthy of engagement.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to Macy's, right, and buy a shirt. You don't ask how much did my button cost me and how much did the sleeves cost me and the collarbone in there, what did it cost me? You want a holistic cost, because in the end of the day, that's it. You want to know what the taxes are. Yes. Besides that, you know, you want to know what the cost is. So as a shipper, do I really want to know these nuts and bolts? No, because freight is an accessorial to me selling my product. I don't need to know the accessorial of the accessorial of the accessorial. You know, that's my fifth cousin. I don't need to know him, you know. Basically, all I need to know is what is in my wheelhouse, and that's important. So again, value creation. If you're a provider and you break up your surcharges into a PhD kind of a document, right? That's not creating value. I mean, those 5 pages of surcharges that come by my desk go straight back into the wastebasket, because that's not creating value. The value is, how do I reduce working capital? Tell me,
Exactly.
and I'm willing to listen.
And Siva, that's exactly where I started my career. I was in a trucking company. I worked, you know, and we were focused on rate per mile. That's the $50 that you guys were talking about earlier. I then started working in a logistics company and looking at the entire supply chain and realized I'm talking about, you know, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars of transportation spend, you know, not the $50. And that's really where the benefit is. It's not in that deep down accessorial. But I would tell you, Rob, what you need to do is you need to be able to optimize with that. You need to have that as part of your decision criteria to make sure that everything's gonna deliver. So it just brought back these memories where, as when I was a trucker, was rate per mile. You know, how can I go from, you know, this will date me, you know, from $1.40 to $1.42, and Siva could care less, you know, right? He's focused on, I've got these $1 million networks and nodes in my supply chain that I've got to figure out, one, how they deliver on time, and two, how I can manage and report the cost, because it's all that working capital in his product that's out there.
Yeah. Hey, we only have sort of five minutes, a little bit over, I think, before we need to wrap up. So it would be great to, I know we could talk about this for a lot longer, but to just go around the panel and try to wrap up, like summarize some points that everyone has made for the audience, so that we don't leave their head spinning at the end of the call. So I'm going to start with Siva. If you were to wrap up this discussion, what are the say 3 things that you want to get across to everyone today?
Well, firstly, I'm an eternal optimist, and we can get this done. Okay, we need to get together as a community, put our egos aside, sit on the table, and say how we fix this and whose lives are we planning to improve. I think we take it from that angle. You will find you'll get more people signing up to the program because we're improving lives. It's sustainability. It's one of the 17 UN SDG goals. Okay, I'm not trying to be big, preaching over here, but I think we should take that fresh angle and look at it, because the old angle is beaten to death and it's not giving us what we want. So we need to take a fresh angle and look at it. And I'm an optimist, and I think with all that we spoke about, those are the components. If we can put that together, I think we'll have a beautiful vision.
Thank you. And Todd.
Yeah, and I'd like to think of myself as an optimist too, Siva. I guess what I want to leave with is, there's huge opportunities for optimization in the supply chain. Every time you reuse a container, you're going to save $150 to $400 in direct transportation costs. There's indirect costs that we all may or may not benefit from, but you're also going to eliminate over 400 pounds of emissions. We are strong advocates for sustainability, and street turns and the optimization is really the key to unlocking those emission savings. If that's the biggest opportunity for optimization, it's also the biggest opportunity for getting carbon credits. Typically, when you street turn, 3, 4, 5 containers, you're going to get 1 metric ton of emissions saved. So it's a big opportunity for a small price, and customers have a choice. Oftentimes today they're looking at, maybe I'll go out and I'll offset my spend with by purchasing carbon credits. But we think you can actually create carbon credits by doing this, so you can get accredited and certifiable carbon credits by doing the street turns. So, partnering with a company like MatchBack that's really focused on that sustainability and the reuse, and using, with the visibility that comes from Clockwork, there's a big opportunity to reduce those empty miles to find those optimization opportunities for everybody. So,
yeah,
thank you.
Sense. Yeah, thanks. And Rob.
I think it's been a great discussion, Andy. Thank you for hosting, and thank you, Siva and Todd, for joining. I love the supply chain. I worked in it my whole career. I love the fact that when you move something from A to B, you create this magic value that just appears and has driven that wealth around the world. There's a reason port cities are great cities, and in modern supply chain, it's the independent guy, the small guy that had traditionally through history has always benefited, is being disintermediated. And I love the fact that now, for the first time, technology is able to change that, and we're able to reconnect to all the players. When I founded Clockwork, people said the drivers will never do it. Now I don't hear that anymore, which is fantastic. I do hear a little bit, the dispatchers aren't going to like it, but that's okay. We'll make the dispatchers happy next. And I think for the first time, we're in a position where the technology is in the right place. The demand from customers like Siva are leading the way to say, no, we really need this. This can really happen. And really, for the first time, we're at a point where the supply chain could actually be, quite something special, quite different than anything we've seen before, where a global shipper can say, I'm going I've gained control of my delivery network globally, and now I'm going to take miles off the road, or I'm going to optimize for rate, or I'm going to optimize for security, I'm going to optimize for safety, whatever their strategy is. That is a world that is becoming possible. We can see it we can just see it over the horizon. So
yeah,
that's where I'll feed your optimism with that one, Siva.
Yeah, and I think with every recession or every challenge, pandemic, good things come out of these periods, right? These trends may have started earlier, before the pandemic, but often recessions or pandemics accelerate some good trends. So, and I think with inflation as well, things like working capital continue to be super important. So I hope that the headline fact that the vessels are coming in and there's less congestion at the port doesn't mean that attention is turned away from just continuing this trend to work through these logistics problems. So and I know that's our mission, and I hope everyone listening as well is buying into the mission that we can make real improvement. So I want to thank everyone for attending, and thank you all as well for participating. And I wish everyone also a good rest of their evening or morning or early morning, night, wherever you are in the world. So, but really appreciate the discussion, and look forward to the next Clockwork roundtable. Maybe we'll tackle last mile. As
I love it.
There you go. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Everyone. Thank you.